This story begins a millennia ago, on a continent whose name has been lost to time. On this continent, there was a great and powerful kingdom, which possessed wealth beyond imagination. For many moons, this kingdom knew only peace, and its resulting prosperity. But one day, this peace was broken by an evil wizard. The wizard terrorized the kingdom with his dark powers, rendering armies to ash and cities to rubble. The land's heroes tried and failed to end the wizard's rampage. With no one left to stand in his way, the wizard kidnapped the princess of the land, a woman worshipped by the people for her honesty and purity. But all hope is not lost, for now, a shining knight, an embodiment of the land's virtues, rides to save the princess from the wizard and bring peace back to the land. Prologue. The knight rode forward on his trusty steed, paying no heed to the bloodgrass and other plants trampled in his wake. It had been nigh a month since the princess's kidnapping, a month since the knight had begun his journey. He had not let the time go to waste. The knight had journeyed across the land, searching for any possible leads as to the vile wizard's location, through the influence of wine, or, when necessary, a knife. But now, all the evidence, all the leads, led to here.
Whoa!
A cave in the middle of nowhere, completely innocuous, if not for the magical symbols carved into its walls. The knight, at the sight of the cave's mouth, dismounted.
Whoa there!
The knight, upon calming his horse, turned his attention back to the cave.
Fitting. A vile home for a vile creature.
The horse's reins in his hand, the knight cautiously took his first step into the cave. As he continued along, his vision grew more and more obscured by the seemingly endless darkness of the cavern. The knight was no child, and thus unafraid of the dark. Still, the lack of visibility, combined with the knight's vulnerable position, began to make the knight nervous.
If something were to attack, so be it. I shall give them a fight as I would any other. Knight! Ah!
The knight jumped back, adrenaline and fear running through his veins. The knight unsheathed his sword and swept at the air, hitting nothing. It was then that the knight realized the wizard was deeper into the cave and using his magic to project his voice. The knight kept his sword unsheathed.
Who dares enter my domain?
My name is not important. What matters is that I will defeat you and release the princess from your vile grip.
The princess, eh? You're one of those heroes who grew up on fairy tales and lies. Well, I will save your dignity, fair knight. Turn back now! The woman is not who you think she is.
You are truly foolish if you think I will believe your trick, felon.
Fine then, do what you will. But know this. If you continue, you will face 3 trials. Each will test you in different ways. Each will be harder than the last. And take heed, for this is your final chance to turn away.
The knight smiled, noting the tone of fear in the wizard's voice.
I accept your challenge, puerile as it may be. Know that I will rescue the princess, and you will fall to my blade before the day is done.
The knight tugged on his horse's reins and ran forward, disappearing into the inky blackness. End of prologue. Act 1. Hours passed, and the knight literally saw nothing. Before, the darkness of the cave had been oppressive, but now it was simply annoying.
When will this blasted darkness lift?
As if on cue, a light broke through the darkness further in, shining off the knight's pristine armor. The knight ran forward, eager to finally re-enter the visible world. Over-eager, perhaps, for if not for his horse slowing his stride, he would have fallen down a rather steep gap.
Whoa! Nothing can ever be easy, can it?
The knight let go of the reins, leaving the horse to its own devices. The knight explored his side of the gap, and eventually came upon the tree. From a distance, it looked the same as any other, but up close, the tree was immense, larger than any the knight had ever seen. The knight quickly realized that the tree was the perfect length to cross the gap, once it had been felled, of course.
Brilliant! Not even the wizard can face the purity of nature.
The knight once again unsheathed his blade, and prepared to fell the long-dead monolith of bark. He was stopped just short of the cut by a horrible noise.
Stop!
By the Lionheart!
The knight could only stare as a terrible mass of scaly flesh descended from the ceiling on 2 leather-clad wings. The knight was horrified, but his fear ebbed as he further inspected the creature. Its body was impish and covered entirely in slick green scales of varying shape and condition. Its arms were like that of an ape, but its legs, if they could even be called legs, were practically non-existent. As for the face, it was nothing more than a mass of tentacles connected to a disproportionately large head. The knight was disgusted, but no longer was he frightened by the eldritch creature. The knight pointed his blade directly at the creature's head, prepared for battle.
Fall to me, foul creature!
Put your sword away, knight. I mean you no harm.
Don't you play games with me, vile thing!
No games. Only truth. I shall let you and your horses pass unproposed. All I ask is that you leave this tree be.
The creature did something. The knight knew not what it was at first, but eventually identified it as a perverted bow. An insult, perhaps.
Say I accepted your offer. How, pray tell, shall I get across this gap and to the maiden?
Maiden? You mean the princess? I assure you, she's anything but a maiden. I shall tell you now. Turn back, for she is not who you think she is.
That is what the accursed wizard said.
He is a wizard, but he is not vile.
You work for him.
Yes, but he is a good man. For you see, I am the last of my kind, and he has saved me from death. With my survival, my race lives on.
I see evil likes company.
As for getting across the gap, there is a ledge to the side of the cave, big enough for both you and your horses. You may use this and to get across the gap. With this, I bid you farewell.
The creature again performed the perverted bow, angering the knight. As the creature flew away, the sound of cracking wood echoed through the cavern. The creature turned around to find, much to its horror, the knight, with his sword deeply embedded into the bark.
No!
The creature dived, claws open, ready to maim, possibly even kill. The creature, blinded by rage, underestimated the knight's speed. With one swift movement, the knight cut through the creature's wing and across its chest. The creature fell in a thud, barely conscious. The knight approached, sword raised for the final blow. He froze as he heard a noise emanate from inside the tree. Sword still firmly in hand, the knight cautiously approached the source of the noise. The knight recoiled in horror as he gazed within the tree's hollow basin. Eggs, clear eggs, with what appeared to be smaller versions of the same creature. It was then that the knight came to a horrible realization.
You're female!
Yes, as I said, I'm the last of my kind. But soon I will not be alone. I can survive these wounds. Worry not. I just hope you have learned your lesson.
Before the creature could finish, the knight thrust his sword into the basin, destroying the eggs, and staining his armor with the fluid of the unborn creatures.
No! You monster! Why would you? Why?
The creature laid there. Life faded from its eyes. The knight let out a sigh before regaining his composure and facing the fallen creature.
With me, your evil kind ends.
The knight, filled with pride, glanced at the now empty eggshells and again at his still dripping armor. He shrugged and finished chopping down the tree. It landed with a thwack and the sound of wood bending into a new shape. The knight called his horse, and the two continued on their way.
Huh. Ironic. The creature calling me a monster.
As the knight entered the next passage of the cave, he noticed that far to the right was a ledge, large enough for both him and his horse to walk across.
Well, what do you know? The creature was telling the truth.
End of Act 1. Act 2. As the knight entered the center of the cave, he could hear a large thumping, which only got louder as he continued on. The knight, steeled from his encounter with the creature, had his sword drawn, prepared for the worst. Eventually, the thumping ceased, and the knight let out a sigh of relief, a sigh interrupted by the arrival of an impossibly large beast, a cyclops. The creature was horrible. True to its name, the cyclops possessed but one eye. Its body was naked, save for the loincloth lazily tied around its waist. The worst part, though, was its peeling orange skin, so vile that it almost made the knight's eyes water.
Ugh! Such evil!
Who goes there? The knight dug his feet into the ground, his sword inches away from the creature's blubberous torso.
Have at ye, monster! Face my steel! Did you not see me?
I see you, little knight. I am just wondering why you have that sword. After all, I have done nothing to provoke you.
Your mere presence provokes me.
How unfortunate.
The cyclops moved, his body fat shaking with every step. The knight tightened his grip. Surely now he would face the creature in a duel, and yet nothing happened. Rather, the cyclops collapsed onto the ground, its girth causing the stones to crack as he sat on them and stalactites to fall from the ceiling.
I mean you no harm. You may pass.
The knight didn't know how to respond to this. Once again, the creature of darkness feigned mercy. He gazed down further into the cave. Nothing within except the various stalactites that had fallen onto the ground. The knight turned to the cyclops.
Why are you even here, little knight?
Why am I here? Why am I here? You know why I am here. I am here to rescue the fair princess from your vile master.
The princess, you say? You have come on a fool's errand, then. The princess is not who you think she is. You would do better to turn back now and save yourself the trouble.
The knight was furious. Here this blob sat, insulting him, degrading him.
You dare challenge my honor?
In an instant, the blade was once again pointed towards the beast. This time, the cyclops did not react.
Prepare to die with what little honor you have.
No, I will not harm you, and you cannot harm me, so there is no point in fighting. If you truly want the princess, then go ahead. It is not my place to stop you.
The cyclops' single eyelid drooped. signaling his boredom. Without a word, he rose himself from his impromptu throne and turned his back on the knight, which only served to further enrage him. The knight ran towards the Cyclops, fully intent on piercing the creature's hide. Then he stopped as a stalactite fell from the ceiling right by the knight's feet.
Cyclops!
What is it now?
A sharp pain stabbed through the Cyclops' eye. His entire body convulsed and shuddered. Then, nothing. Only darkness. He was blind. The Cyclops clawed at his face, trying to find the source of the blinding, only to find a strangely wet stalactite where his eye once was. The Cyclops let out a scream, and the knight stood there, beaming with pride.
Ha ha! I have bested ye, foul monster!
The knight, satisfied, took his horse and began to walk away. The Cyclops, having finally overcome the shock of the ordeal, began to speak.
Why? Why have you done this to me? I did not raise my hand against you. I didn't even raise my voice.
The knight ignored him and continued on.
Please, I can't live like this. Kill me, please.
The knight turned to the feeble creature, arm and hand over his heart.
No, sir, for it is against my code of honor to strike down a defenseless opponent.
The knight smiled, turned away one last time, and went on his way.
But I would not be in this state if not for you. This is your doing. This is your doing.
The Cyclops collapsed, sobbing. As the knight continued further into the cave, the sobs grew more distant, until eventually only the knight could be heard.
Pathetic!
End of Act 2. Act 3. The knight, while he had no map to prove it, could feel that he was close to his prize. His determination and zeal had pushed him past the myriad obstacles and annoyances of the cave. His horse was not so lucky. As he approached yet another open chamber, the knight felt the reins tighten. The horse began to slow.
Come on now, we're almost there.
The knight hoped that his encouragement would allow his steed to continue, but it was in vain, and the knight knew that. Perhaps it was the lack of food or drink. Perhaps it was the endless walking. Perhaps it was simply the stress of the endeavor. Whatever the reason, the gaunt horse was only seconds away from collapse. The knight braced himself to hold up the creature's rapidly falling form, only to be distracted by a large noise emanating directly in front of him. Looking to find the source of the noise, the two slowly walked into the chamber. As the knight peered over the wall, a gauntlet of flame burst by, consuming nearly the entire chamber in blistering heat. The horse, naturally, attempted to flee. The knight restrained it, but not without cost, for his right hand was exposed to the flame. Yelling out in pain, the knight threw the affected gauntlet onto the ground, and took stock of his hand. Half of it was burned, the other singed, but it was intact. The same could not be said for the gauntlet, for as the knight glanced at its resting place, he saw that it had nearly melted away.
By the Lionheart! What is this?
Another stream of fire burst forth, this time causing more stalactites to fall. One of them scratched the knight's chest piece, barely missing the weak points in his armor.
Dang it! That was too close.
As the fire dissipated, the knight looked around the chamber to find cover away from the weak ceiling he was under now. The knight found his prize to the left of his position. It was smaller than before, but much safer. The knight and his increasingly reluctant steed dashed toward the cover. The knight heroically took a knee upon reaching their destination. Meanwhile, the horse completely collapsed onto its side. Feeling safe, at least for the moment, the knight looked over to uncover the identity of his aggressor. To his surprise, the source of the flame was a fearsome dragon.
A dragon? But they only serve the kingdom, or those they trust. It must be a creature of evil like the wizard.
Flames gushed forward yet again, barely missing the knight's previously exposed head. When it subsided, the knight took another look at the beast. Laying on a bed of straw, the dragon possessed a thin, serpentine body typical of its species. It was adorned in crimson scales, a pattern that was only broken by the obsidian horns on the top of its head. It also possessed 2 large wings, capable of lifting the 1,000-pound creature into the heavens. Satisfied with his assessment, the knight scanned the area, and then he found what could only be a miracle. Pandician poison root, infamous amongst the educated for the potency of its venom. Used by kings and criminals alike, the root could end the life of any creature in no more than 5 seconds, even a dragon.
But how to introduce it?
The knight did not possess the luxury of time needed to painstakingly coat his weapon, and he lacked the skills to synthesize a potion. Once again, the knight scanned the chamber and noticed the meat-bare bones of cattle in the corner.
So, the creature eats meat.
The knight turned to his mount, once a proud steed, now a barely breathing wreck. The knight nodded and used his sword to cut the plant from the ground. The knight carefully patted the horse's mane, and then slowly, without opposition, placed the root inside of its mouth, making sure that it chewed. And then, it was gone.
Your sacrifice will not be in vain.
The knight dragged his horse to the dragon, now completely docile at the sight of a meal.
O great one, I offer you my steed. May it feed you for 1,000 lifetimes.
The knight bowed to the beast, which ate up the horse in a single gulp. Then began the coughing, the sputtering, the shaking. When the dragon realized what was happening, it grew desperate, clawing at anything it could to save itself. But it was too late. When the dragon finally understood who was to blame for its condition, it was dead. The knight, undeterred, walked past the dragon's corpse, halting only when he heard a muffled cry for help. The voice was hushed, likely blocked by a gag, but it was unmistakable. It was the princess. The knight marched forward, anticipating his inevitable confrontation with the wizard. As he did, something crumbled beneath his feet. A picture of a red baby dragon, and the person holding it, a spitting image of the wizard, albeit much younger. The knight figured its intention quickly, and threw it away in disgust.
What coward would sacrifice his own pet?
End of Act 3. Act 4. The knight was tired of these games, these trivialities, these trials. But at last his goal was in sight. No one would stop him now. The knight came to a wooden door, mystic symbols carved into it like those at the opening of the cave. Wasting no time, the knight kicked down the door and entered the furnished room within. Immediately, he saw an old man collapse in fear, and just inches away from him, the princess. She was shackled to the wall, a gag in her mouth. The knight pointed his sword toward the elder wizard.
Please, spare me. I am but an old man. You're here for the princess, aren't you?
The wizard's voice was completely consumed by fear, a far cry from the booming warnings at the entrance of his lair. The knight couldn't help but smile.
Yes! I have completed your trials, defeated your minions, and now I will take what is rightfully mine.
She is not who you think she is. She's a monster. I was in a town once long ago, and she came to visit. I did not bow to her, for if I did, I would drop the vials I carried. And then she burned the whole village down. And she watched as her knights killed everyone but me. She killed them all. You're a man of honor. If you truly cared, you would... Oh!
The wizard was cut short, literally. The sword sliced through the man's aged body like butter, and as it crumpled to the floor, nothing of the wizard remained.
Creatures like you don't deserve life.
Taking care to step on the broken body, the knight stepped forward and released the princess from her bonds.
Thank you, brave knight. If you had not come here, I don't know what would have happened.
Neither would I, deluded old fool. If you destroyed that village, you clearly had reason.
You are correct, my hero.
The knight blushed under his helmet.
Methinks we should leave this place.
I would be happy to, good sir.
End of Act 4. Epilogue.
And this is where I slayed the mighty dragon.
Incredible!
Aye, it was. But it came at a cost, for my steed sacrificed its life to ensure my quest could be completed.
Your mount will be honored as much as any soldier.
He is no longer here, but I faced the mighty Cyclops in this very room.
And you defeated him as well?
Of course I did, in honorable combat as well. When I defeated him, he requested I end his life. However, I spared him, for he already was defeated.
You are nobler among all else. What is that thing?
I could not even begin to describe that horrible creature. Know, however, that it was the last of its kind, and never again will such monstrosities plague your kingdom.
I owe a great debt to you, Sir Knight.
The light of the sun touched both the knight's armor and the princess's golden hair. The knight's armor was no longer as shining as it once was, now stained by his many battles and triumphs. The princess removed the knight's helmet, and the two gazed into each other's eyes.
My hero.
Indeed.
Then they, and only they, lived happily ever after.